The recent attacks on Rafah has sparked massive outrage across the globe. All eyes on Rafah, a phrase that has been trending massively on Instagram, with millions from across the world coming out in support of Palestinians residing in Rafah city that's located in war-torn Gaza. The Rafah tragedy has turned into a huge viral social media trend, with global personalities, leaders to the common masses pledging their support to the Palestinians affected by the recent Israeli strikes. But this latest attack has triggered global outrage against Israel, with many people taking to social media to post against the deadly attack. The phrase is meant as a request for bystanders to not look away from what's happening in the city of Rafah, where as many as 1.4 million people are sheltering after fleeing from the violent fighting elsewhere in Gaza as Israel continues its offensive. Well, the global condemnation comes after an Israeli airstrike on the 26th of May caused a massive fire, killing 45 people in a tent camp in Gaza's Rafah area. According to Israel, this attack was carried out to eliminate Hamas's chief of staff for the West Bank, along with another official who was allegedly behind the attacks on Israelis. But horrific videos have emerged of the aftermath of the attack, with the most notable of a man holding a corpse of a young child without a head. Chaotic scenes were witnessed as the strike set fire to Palestinian tents, burning occupants to death and leaving so many others severely injured. Witnesses recount seeing charred bodies and burned limbs as the victims' cries filled the air. Heartbreaking scenes of burnt children who were taking refuge in these camps, and images of people screaming in pain and agony with such helplessness as their loved ones were burning, and hospitals operating in an ocean of chaos are most heart-wrenching and harrowing. Well, thousands of civilians had been sheltering in the area, seeking some minimal protection from the continuous Israeli attacks across Gaza. The Israeli government, in fact, hadn't issued any orders to evacuate the area before it was attacked. Tragically, many of the dead were preparing to go to sleep when the attack occurred. So why did Israel do this? Well, initially, the Israeli army claimed that it had struck a quote-unquote Hamas compound in Rafah, in which significant Hamas terrorists had been operating. It further added that it was aware of reports indicating that as a result of the recent strike and fire that was ignited, several civilians in the area were harmed. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has called the attack a tragic mistake. Israel's Prime Minister said, and I quote, "Despite our best efforts not to harm those not involved, unfortunately a tragic error happened last night. We are investigating the case." Shockingly, this attack comes 2 days after the International Court of Justice had ordered Israel to halt its offensive on Rafah. Flagging the disastrous humanitarian situation, the United Nations top court has asked Israel to immediately stop its military offensive in the southern Gaza city of Rafah, a dramatic intervention that left the nation and its chief ally, the United States, increasingly isolated on the world stage. European officials have demanded Israel to abide by the International Court of Justice ruling, suggesting that it is violating the order by pushing ahead with military action in Rafah, where more than 1 million Palestinians are seeking refuge in dire conditions. But Israeli officials have given no indication that they will be intending to change course anytime soon. The ruling, which is legally binding but which the ICJ has no real powers to enforce, capped a bad week for Israel on the global stage. The International Criminal Court's chief prosecutor has even sought an arrest warrant for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other leaders before Spain, Norway, and Ireland announced that they would recognize Palestinian state. Israel's long-threatened Rafah incursion has stirred renewed outrage and has prompted an outcry from global leaders across. Israel, however, has vowed to press on with the Rafah strike despite global condemnation and also a US warning. The United Nations has long warned of a looming famine, especially in the north of besieged Gaza. And since the Rafah incursion, the United Nations chief has said that it is becoming increasingly worrying about malnutrition in the south. United States is facing growing pressure to take a firmer stance after a deadly strike in the Gazan city, and questions are mounting over just how long President Joe Biden can keep silent and tolerate an Israeli assault on Rafah when the International Court of Justice, the United Nations top court, of which both the US and Israel are members, orders it to stop. So then the question that arises now is whether the international community do more. The United Nations Security Council is set to convene an emergency meeting over the attack on Rafah. Now, to date, the United States has vetoed every United Nations Security Council proposal aimed at holding Israel accountable. So, is mere condemnation enough? Well, the brutality of the war and blatant disregard for international laws has clearly shaken global politics to the core. The question is, will world leaders be able to get Netanyahu to stop?